And moving on, let's turn our attention to Malawi. Last week, the country held elections. It was seen as a two-horse race between the incumbent President Lazarus Chakwera and the former President Peter Mutharika.
Brothers and sisters across Africa and the diaspora, welcome back to Voice of Africa, the home where we tell our own stories with clarity, courage, and respect for the facts. Before we dive in, please tap like so YouTube recommends this video to more people. And if you believe in this work, elevating African voices with serious research, consider supporting the channel with super thanks. Your support keeps this platform independent, consistent, and growing. On September 16th, 2025, Malawians went to the polls in an election that felt less like routine democracy and more like a hard reset. For many, it was a referendum on survival, high inflation, painful food prices, fuel scarcity, and the aftermath of devastating climate shocks. In that context, the political tide surged back toward an old rival, former President Peter Mutharika, now 85. By September 24th, the sitting president, Lazarus Chakwera, publicly conceded, acknowledging Mutharika's insurmountable lead even before the official announcement, clearing the path for his predecessor's return. That concession mattered, and it mattered fast. It reduced the risk of a prolonged institutional standoff and set the tone for a constitutional transition, something that still isn't guaranteed in many parts of our continent when margins are wide and emotions are high. Media tracking partial results had already shown the direction of travel, Mutharika leading by a commanding margin as verified tallies rolled in, with independent outlets and wires mapping that trend hour by hour. Subsequent calculations based on official figures confirmed that the former president had indeed won the race. Why did this happen, and why now? To answer that, we have to step back into the lived experience of ordinary Malawians over the last few years. Inflation has hovered above 20% for extended periods, eroding purchasing power and forcing families into impossible choices. Beyond macroeconomics, a punishing drought and earlier cyclone damage destroyed crops and deepened hardship in a country where agriculture is the backbone of livelihoods. Those conditions are not abstract. They show up as empty plates, as fuel queues, as markets where a little cash buys less every month. When voters walked to the polling stations, that pain walked with them. This election also unfolded in the shadow of Malawi's unique electoral history. In 2019, Mutharika was initially declared the winner, but the courts annulled the result due to widespread irregularities, an extraordinary decision that led to a 2020 rerun won by Chakwera. The 2025 vote, then, became more than a contest of policies. It was a rematch of legitimacy and competence, with both camps carrying the weight of past expectations. When the 2025 ballots were cast and counted, the emerging pattern favored Mutharika, and by September 24th, Chakwera conceded, urging respect for the people's choice and a peaceful transition. Let's talk about what observers saw on the ground. International missions, including the EU Election Observation Mission and the SADC Electoral Observation Mission, issued preliminary statements after visiting polling centers across the country. Their reports paint a mostly orderly picture with crucial caveats. They noted that while the general environment was calm, there were logistical gaps. Some polling stations opened late due to disputes over ballot inspection procedures or late arrivals of officials, some lacked shelter and proper signage, and accessibility for persons with disabilities was uneven. Counting sometimes took place in cramped rooms with inadequate lighting, which can complicate accuracy and transparency. Still, security forces were broadly professional, queues were managed, and legal provisions allowed those already in line at closing time to vote, practices that protect the right to participate even when administration is under strain. These details matter because the credibility of any election is not only about who won, it is also about how the victory was earned, recorded, and announced. Both major camps flirted with premature victory claims while the count was still ongoing. Observers cautioned against that as it deepens public distrust. What stabilized the moment was the incumbent's concession and the steady drip of official figures that matched the direction reported by multiple outlets. In the balance between rumor and procedure, the institutions did enough to keep the temperature from boiling over. In a time of crisis. One answer is the anti-incumbent wave we've seen repeatedly on the continent when living standards deteriorate. If inflation is high, if wages are stagnant, if fuel and food are hard to afford, the incumbent carries the bill. Analysts and pollsters were already picking up that signal months before the vote. By the time ballots were cast, frustration had crystallized into a practical decision: consolidate behind the strongest challenger rather than split the opposition across smaller parties. That strategic consolidation likely amplified Mutharika's margin. But a comeback on paper is not a solution on the ground. Mutharika returns to a country wrestling with a severe cost of living crisis and climate damage that will not wait for speeches. Malawi's economy faces large fiscal deficits, chronic forex pressure, and deep rural vulnerability. Any new administration must move quickly on food security, fuel supply stability, and currency management, while rebuilding confidence with farmers, traders, and external partners. That work is technical, not theatrical. It also requires credible anti-corruption guardrails so that emergency measures do not become new rent-seeking channels. There is also a political reality we must name. Leadership at 85 comes with questions about stamina, succession, and institutional depth. The clearest way to answer those questions is to govern through institutions, not personal networks, to strengthen the civil service, empower anti-corruption bodies, and make the Electoral Commission and Auditor General beyond reproach. If Malawi leans on rules more than personalities, it can build resilience that outlives any single leader. For viewers across Africa, there are larger lessons in this moment. First, elections are not just events, they're processes. Logistics, training, accessibility, and transparency determine whether citizens leave a polling station feeling heard or cheated. When observers point to late openings, poor signage, or dimly lit counting rooms, they're not picking at details. They're describing the conditions that either protect or endanger public trust. The good news is that many of these issues are fixable with planning and resources. Second, our democracies are only as strong as our tolerance for losing. Chakwera's concession is an instructive act. He acknowledged the scale of his opponent's lead and prioritized a peaceful handover. That doesn't erase the pain of defeat, and it doesn't make the incoming government infallible. But it reinforces a civic norm that Africa needs more of, the discipline to respect the people's verdict, then regroup, reorganize, and hold the winners accountable from opposition benches. Third, we must not romanticize comebacks. Mutharika's return is not a solution by itself. It is an opportunity and an early test. The policies that follow will tell us whether this vote was a breakthrough or a pause. Does the new government stabilize prices? Can it unlock support without ceding sovereignty? Will it fix the nuts and bolts of service delivery, fertilizer availability, seed distribution, rural road maintenance, so that agricultural households can rebuild after droughts and floods? Will it shield the poor through targeted social protection while avoiding reckless subsidies that break the budget? These trade-offs are where leadership becomes real. Meanwhile, the role of civil society and youth remains central. Malawians turned out and queued for hours because they believed their ballots mattered. That same energy must carry into the months ahead, tracking promises, fact-checking announcements, and insisting on transparent procurement and measurable outcomes. International observers have done their part with preliminary statements. Now, domestic watchdogs must press for follow-through, the release of full disaggregated results, the publication of polling station-level tallies, and rapid correction of any administrative gaps identified by missions. This is how the next election becomes cheaper, faster, and more trusted than the last. Zooming out, Malawi's story is also Africa's story. Across the continent, citizens are judging governments by kitchen table metrics: the price of cooking oil, the distance to clean water, the school fees that can or cannot be paid, and whether climate shocks are met with organized responses or finger-pointing. When politics becomes a contest of daily dignity rather than slogans, incumbents lose their automatic advantage. That is what we are seeing: electorates that reward whoever can deliver relief fastest, regardless of age or past glory. So, what should we watch in the next 30 to 90 days? First, the formal certification and any legal challenges. Speed and clarity here will stabilize expectations. Second, the transition signals from the president-elect, key appointments to finance, agriculture, energy, and justice, an early plan to secure staples and fuel, and a communication style that sets measurable targets rather than vague aspirations. Third, the relationship with external partners, whether Malawi can secure concessional support to bridge shortages while staying accountable to its own people and parliament. Fourth, visible moves on anti-corruption and institutional independence that reassure citizens this won't be business as usual. Finally, we should watch the tone from the opposition. Will it be constructive pressure that sharpens policy, or zero-sum politics that drags the country back into limbo? To our brothers and sisters in Malawi, your patience in line, your insistence on your rights, and your demand for better governance is a lesson to the continent. To the new leadership, the margin of victory is not a blank check. It is a down payment of trust that must be serviced monthly with results. To civil society, keep the receipts. To the region and observers, stay engaged through implementation, not just election week. If you've watched this far and value in-depth Africa First reporting, please hit like. It tells the algorithm to share this with more viewers who care about our continent. And if you want to help us do more field interviews, commission on-the-ground footage, and pay researchers so we can verify local claims with precision, please consider supporting with a super thanks. Every contribution, small or large, helps us keep this channel focused, independent, and accountable to you. Let us close on a simple truth. Democracy is not a miracle. It is maintenance. It's the unglamorous work of training poll workers, printing accurate registers, lighting counting rooms properly, and releasing results on time. It is also the leadership to admit defeat with dignity and the discipline to govern through institutions. In Malawi this week, we saw the risks of delay and the power of concession. Now begins the harder chapter, delivering relief and rebuilding trust. If that happens, the ballot will have done more than change a president. It will have reaffirmed the people's authority, the only authority that counts. Thank you for watching Voice of Africa. Like, share, subscribe, and if you can, support this work through super thanks. See you in the next video.